You're listening to From the Chair, and I'm your host, Mike Hamilton. Join us each episode as we talk to athletic directors from across America. We're going to talk about topics like leadership, career development, issues of the day, and I can promise you we're going to have some fun along the way too. So sit back, listen in, and let's dive in. Let's go. All right, welcome in. Today's episode is with Ryan Ivey. He's the Director of Athletics at Stephen F. Austin. Ryan, good to see you, man. Thanks for joining me.
You bet, Mike. Thanks for having me. Great to see you.
Well, always good to catch up, and loved when you lived here in Middle Tennessee, and I hate that we don't get to see each other more frequently, but know that will come in due time. So, hey, man, we're going to jump right in. In fact, I wanted to kind of come off the top and talk a little bit about some engagement you and I had when you were at Austin Peay as athletic director, which was your job before you moved to Texas. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just informative to the kind of athletic director you are. And I'm going to ask you to share something here related to the Development Foundation. When I came up and visited with you there in Clarksville, and if you recall, we met with the I think it was called the Govs Club or Governor's Club, the fundraising organization in Clarksville. You know, obviously, Austin Peay's had success on a number of different fronts for a number of years, and basketball has been one of those places where they've had success. And you and I were discussing how do you reinvigorate their development efforts, their fundraising efforts. I'll call it, I want to be fair. I mean, I think the efforts were stagnant at the time. They were raising some money, but relatively stagnant. And if I recall, they maybe had a club that they, a level where you paid $250 and you got free food at the arena at every game, and you could bring guests.
Exactly right.
So net, there weren't a lot of dollars left over for actually fundraising purposes. And you and I both knew that, hey, to change the mentality, we've got to cast the vision. You're going to have to make some hard changes, have some hard conversations to recast what fundraising can be. So when any athletic director goes into a new place and they're trying to establish the ground rules for success, there are obviously historical nuances of a particular school that they have to work their way around. And that was one at Austin Peay. How did you navigate making sure that you honored those who had been around Austin Peay for a long time and who had been generous, but also helping to understand that there was a bigger vision to be cast for Austin Peay Athletics, and part of that involved changing some dynamics around the way you were organized. That's a lot for me to spew out, but I'm trying to get to where I believe will be some good information for those who are listening to the podcast.
Yeah, I think you one of your words that you used just there was key to it is honoring, right? I think the first thing that you have to do is you have to honor those individuals, right? You have to honor those individuals that have worked tirelessly over the years to try to get it to that point. Because again, that Govs Club board, that was a volunteer board. These individuals that had full-time jobs. They loved Austin Peay. They loved Governor's basketball. They loved Governor's football. They loved our student athletes. They loved that community. And so the first thing that I think we had to do was say, look, we're not trying to take away from anything that you guys have done to this point. Like what you've done it's been great. We appreciate it. But if we're going to get to our vision and achieve our vision, at that point in time, it was to be the premier athletics department in the Ohio Valley Conference. If we're going to achieve that vision, then we've got to figure out how to move forward, right? And we can't keep doing things the same way that we've always done them. And that's just the reality of it, right? And so I think having that conversation and being very open and being very transparent, listening to their thoughts, listening to their ideas, figuring out what we could do to incorporate some of the things that they've done in the past, but also at the same time, change that mindset, right? And change it from more of a transactional giving type opportunity to more philanthropic. And look, I would love for you to be able to come to every basketball game and have a full meal and get your belly full and do all those things. But the reality of it is every time that we do that, we take away from the core purpose and the core mission of making sure that we're able to help our student athletes and our coaches be successful. And I think you have to be honest with people, right? And ultimately, people give to people. And I think if you're honest with those individuals, if you create those relationships, then they're going to see that. And for the most part, not everybody, but for the most part, people are going to understand that and they're going to get on board. And then I think the second part to our success and maybe changing that culture and that really the habits that we had was just getting the right people on board, right? And going to them, and again, having those conversations, because there are going to be leaders and there are going to be influencers in every group. And I think you've got to make sure you attach yourself to those leaders and those influencers and just have those conversations. And ultimately, it may be one-on-one, and you may have to do some things to really help explain that in a different manner. But I think once you do that and they get on board, then those people look to them and say, all right, well, if Joe's on board, then Joe's really part of it, and I'm going to listen to Joe because he really cares about this place.
Well, and look, the proof's in the pudding, right? I mean, you guys were able to reinvigorate the fundraising efforts. Austin Peay saw the short and now long-term benefits of that. Gerald
Right.
has certainly done a tremendous job on building
You
on what you
bet.
started, and the success of the athletic program, has been evident from the groundwork that you guys laid while you were there. And you look, I don't remember the exact number of years you were in Clarksville, Ryan, but you had an opportunity to move back to Texas. You had been the athletic director at Texas A&M Commerce for a while, and you obviously looked at the Stephen F. Austin opportunity as one of significance. You've now been there, I guess you're in your fourth year. Just walk me through the decision to move back to the state of Texas, and when you got the job there, what were the sort of the initial hurdles that maybe you needed to overcome as you moved into that new role?
Right. Yeah. For us, I mean, obviously, I'd been at McNeese State as an assistant associate AD for almost 6 years prior to going to A&M Commerce, and at the time, Stephen F. Austin was in the Southland Conference. So there's a lot of familiarity with me here in Stephen F. Making sure that again, I understood what was going on from a regional standpoint, from a community aspect, and obviously knew Robert Hill and the individuals that were here within the department. And so for us, it was the opportunity of looking at it from a standpoint of we really liked our time in Texas. Now, I'm a Western Kentucky, Mayfield, Kentucky native, right? My wife was from my wife was from Fayetteville, Tennessee, so she's a Middle Tennessee girl, grew up. But her mom and dad had lived in Houston at the time, and I think for us, it was just we really enjoyed our time in Texas. And thinking about it from a standpoint of we really felt like the opportunities here at SFA and just the brand name that was SFA or that is SFA was created higher ceilings for us. And really, when I looked at it from that standpoint, it was we really felt like the highs were going to be higher than the highs that we had at Austin Peay, but we didn't think the lows were going to be as low as maybe some of the ones that we could have there. And I think anytime that you look at those situations, and again, it's a similar level. We were both FCS level, right? We were both, in quote unquote one bid basketball leagues. But from a basketball standpoint, just the brand that it was SFA over the last 10 years in men's basketball, and then historically what our women's basketball program has done, again, being the 7th winningest program all time in women's basketball history. I mean, all those things were important to me, but I think it was the ability to look at it from a standpoint of we felt like we're going to be able to really grow it at a rate that maybe we weren't sure what we could there at Austin Peay. And that wasn't a knock against anybody. It was just really at that time, that's really what we felt moving forward. And I think that was really the biggest kind of selling point for us as well was, again, we got back to East Texas, which is really a place that Kelly and I really loved. And we just felt like this was just really a good opportunity for us. And I think when we got here, some of the similar, situations and things that we'd had at Commerce, that we'd had at Austin Peay as well. Obviously, our football situation here at SFA wasn't great at the time. We had some issues with our coach off the field and kind of dealing with some of those things. I'd kind of gone through something similar at Austin Peay a little bit. We turned the football program around at A&M Commerce, able to do something similar at Austin Peay with hiring the right coach and doing those things. And so it was really creating this vision and casting this vision for us from a departmental standpoint of, yes, we've had success here at SFA, but we're not going to rest on that success. And I'm going to challenge you, and I'm going to challenge the expectations that we have here and creating this vision of becoming the leading mid-major athletics department in the nation. And at that time, I think that was a bold vision for this place with really where we were, and knowing that we had some work to do across the board. And same way with revenue generation, with fundraising, facility work that we certainly had to do and still have to do moving forward. But being able to put this plan in place to really help us grow, I think has been fruitful for us for the last 4 years. And obviously we've had our issues and we've gone through things here just like every place does. But I think we've been able to really hit on that in what I call it. And I think a lot of people go through a strategic planning process when they get to a department or whatever. But we don't call it that. We call it our business tactical plan, right? And what we're trying to do moving forward and creating opportunities and making sure that we're creating these benchmarks and metrics for us moving forward. And I think those are the things that are really important to help us grow.
Yeah. So, along those lines of growth and change, one of the big stories in realignment this past year was I'll call it the forming, if you will, of WAC football, right? And certainly you've mentioned being in the Southland historically successful time during your time there. And, maybe the move to the WAC didn't get as much attention nationally, but I'm certainly sure that it did regionally because of the schools that came on board. I know you've got friends that are part of this move, right? So
Right.
I'm sure you guys were having some conversations along the way.
Yep.
Walk us through the decision to make that move and what you see so far coming out of that decision.
Yeah, well, I mean, we said, and when you talk about this conference realignment, Domino, we've always said that it started with the WAC, right? That Texas and Oklahoma, that was just they were just trying to be like SFA and Sam Houston and Lamar and everybody else, right? So that's the way that we approach it. But I think that's a little different animal. But for us, again, it was looking at it from a standpoint of what can we do to help our institution grow, right? And that was really it from the standpoint we really looked at it as how do we increase the institutional profile that we have for Stephen F. Austin. And at the time, and again, this is not a knock on anybody in the Southland Conference at all, but everyone in Natchitoches, Louisiana, or everyone in Hammond, Louisiana, or everyone in these places that we were going to, they know who Stephen F. Austin is. And so the question is, how do we leverage athletics to help grow our institutional profile? And in order to do that, we've got to get into different markets and we've got to get into opportunities that are larger cities and growing areas that can help us. And if you look at the growth areas in the country, again, Texas is growing like crazy still, but Utah, the state of Utah is actually from a percentage standpoint, the fastest growing state and really within the last 5 years, I think, within the United States. And so knowing that we're going to be able to get into those areas. And then obviously the basketball piece was important to us, right? And again, over the last, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, the Southland was 28, 29, 30 in the net out of 32 leagues. And again, knowing that you're in a one big league and just that was what it was. And we just weren't going to have the opportunity maybe to help position our basketball programs at the level that we certainly wanted it to. So we looked into that. And then to be able to bring back football to the Western Athletic Conference, I think was really important to us. And if you think about the history that is the Western Athletic Conference, you think about, Todd Detmer, you think about Timmy Chang, you think about these just historical, really, really good. You think about Boise State beating Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl, right? And then the guy proposing to his girlfriend on the field, right? I mean, all those things that you think about happened with Western Athletic Conference football. And there's a history there and there's a brand name and there's brand recognition to it that we felt was important to help bring that sport back to the WAC, to help it grow and help really stabilize what that conference was going to be for the future. And, all those things were important to us. But again, we really looked at it from a standpoint, and I think it was important for us to bring similar institutions with us. And that's why, having Sam Houston, having Abilene Christian, having Lamar come with us as well, it created this opportunity for divisional alignment, which we didn't have to send now. We don't have to send tennis teams and everybody off to Seattle all the time. Wanted to make sure that we're creating opportunities to help grow the sport of basketball. And then football, obviously, is just a different animal just because it's one game a week, those type of things. You're typically traveling for the most part anyway moving forward. And so it really made sense for us. And from a net position, I mean, again, we've already seen it help us increase financially from a net position. And, I think people, when we first started, there was conversations of how much more it's going to cost in travel and all those things. And yes, we did those financial analysis, but overall net position wise, we were going to be better off being in the WAC. And so I think we've seen that. I think all those things came into really into play in certainly making that decision. I don't know that we'd have gone if it was just been Stephen F. Austin, just to be honest with you, right? And I think there was strength in numbers, and I still firmly believe that in conference alignment. I think there are strength in numbers when you talk about geographical opportunities for the right institutions that are like-minded. And I think those are conversations that we have to continuously have across the country.
That's great. So let's go back for just a second. You were a punt. You said you're from Kentucky. You
Yep.
were a punter and a holder at University of Memphis, and you had an interesting start to your career, right? Because I know you were a DBO in women's basketball. You worked in
Yep.
minor league baseball. I think you served as like a marketing intern in South Dakota, and then
Yep.
eventually you landed at McNeese State. What was the we were all young one time, Ryan,
You
and
bet.
we when you were starting your career in athletics, what was the aspirational vision? I mean, I'm going to assume that maybe when you were in your 20s and doing those jobs that you weren't necessarily already saying you were going to be an athletic director. Maybe you were, but sort of talk about your line of thinking and what was informative about those jobs, their unique nature of those jobs. How has it helped you become the leader you are today? But also when you said, hey, you know what? This athletic director thing seems to be the track that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think for me, it all started when I was playing at Memphis. And again, I use that term loosely because as a punter and a holder, I don't know that you consider that playing football or not. But and my claim to fame is I held for Stephen Gostkowski, right? So that's my claim to fame, and really out of all of this. But during my time at Memphis, there were two individuals that I think made the biggest impact on me, and that was our director of football operations, John Flowers, and our de facto special teams coach who'd been there forever, Murray Armstrong. And if anyone knew Coach A, you knew of that individual as just being a servant. Coach A was amazing. He and his wife used to live in dorms. They'd been around Memphis football for a long time. And what I saw in those two individuals was how much that they really gave of themselves to help student athletes, right? And to help our team and to do all the things behind the scenes that I don't think anybody really understands how that works from the outside looking in. And so it I'd been involved with athletics and sports since I was 4 years old. And I didn't know what else I was going to do with my life. And just like everyone else, when you get to college and you go talk to your advisor, they say, well, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? I'm 18 years old. I have no idea, right? And I don't know that I'm supposed to know at 18. But at the time, they talked about this degree, sports management, and you can major in sports and you can work in sports. And like a small farm kid from Kentucky, I had no idea what any of those things meant. But getting into it and seeing it, I saw the opportunities there. And so I just wanted to be around sports and I just wanted to be involved with it because it was my passion. It's something that I'm still passionate about. I believe in the value of athletics across the board and the life lessons that it teaches people and how it can help galvanize communities and bring people together. And so I'm a firm believer in that. So that was what I wanted to do. When somebody said, hey, you could work in sports, I'm going to go do that. I still didn't know what that meant at the time, but I was trying to figure that out, right? And so then I started working in minor league baseball again, being in Memphis and having some of the opportunities there, whether that was mentoring with the Memphis Grizzlies who just come to town, right, or interning with the Memphis Redbirds, or helping out the FedEx St. Jude Golf Classic, those type of things, right? I mean, all those things were available there in Memphis. I just didn't have the connection to the professional sports. It was fun and I enjoyed it. And I love minor league baseball. And I would tell people this all the time. Like, I think every person that works in athletics should have to go work one season in minor league baseball. Because if you can figure that out and you can survive that season, then you can do just about anything, right? And it's one of those things that I think is just part of that badge of honor that I wear with it. But I just wasn't making the connection and wasn't making the impact moving forward. And going into it, I mean, to answer your question, I wasn't sure that being an AD is what I wanted to do, but my goal was to have the biggest impact that I could on college athletics when I got into it. And I just said, I don't know what that means, but that's what I want to do. I want to have the biggest impact that I can on this industry and really this profession because it gave me so much, right? And being a college student athlete at Memphis, it gave me so many opportunities moving forward. And so as I got into it, I looked at the director of basketball operations positions, and Coach Flowers helped me with that position and getting in, and saw that. And then, but I knew I didn't want to be a coach, right? I did not want to coach. It wasn't something I wanted to do. And so I really started to go the administration route. And then there was the opportunity at McNeese. Tommy McClellan was the interim athletics director there. He was 25. I was 25. In fact, I'm a month older than he is. And, we connected and got down there. And again, you got two 25-year-olds trying to figure out how to run a Division I athletics department. And we had no clue what we were doing, but we had so much fun just working and grinding and figuring it out and just learning on the job and taking that opportunity and it was probably about 3 or 4 years into that I realized, all right, hey, I really do want to be an AD, and I really think there's an opportunity for me here to really make an impact on college athletics as a whole. In order to do that, I probably need to do that from the AD's chair. And so, after about that 5th year or so, that's when I started looking at opportunities, and just the opportunity at A&M Commerce Division II school popped up, and was able to do it. And then we were just able to kind of snowball from there.
So, if you read a little bit of the history, your bio, other media clippings, you moved to Division II school at A&M Commerce, and the history would show that things were a little bit in disarray internally when you arrived there. So you're getting your first job, and you're trying to probably establish what culture really means, and you had a fan base that was decreasing and some other things. Yep. Talk about just jumping in at Commerce, and I guess you probably went with a plan, but you probably got smacked in the face pretty early on some things that maybe didn't fit the plan. What was that like?
Yeah, no, as the great philosopher Mike Tyson once said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, right? Well, that happened real early for me there at Commerce, because we had to hire a football coach and go through that process. And again, never gone through that really process before. I'd been a part of hiring head coaches, but never had the, kind of buck rest with me, so to speak, with that decision making. And so that was a different process, and something that I'd never really understood. But once we kind of got that individual involved, and we hired Colby Carthel, who's now the head coach here at Stephen F. Austin. But it was about creating and setting that culture, right? And I'm a big believer, and I'm a firm believer on accountability and expectations. And as I told those individuals when I first walked in, and at every place that I've been, at the end of the day, I chose you, right? I chose to be here with you, and I want us to do this together. And here are the expectations, and here are the things that we're going to try to do and certainly try to accomplish moving forward. And I'm not going to apologize for those expectations, okay? And the reality of it is there are going to be things that you're going to have to do that you've probably never been asked to do before. And if you don't want to do that, that's okay. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't mean you're not good at what you do. It just means that you probably can't be here. And so let's go ahead and have that conversation now, and let's get everything on the table, and let's be transparent with one another, because it's going to help all of us down the line. And I think establishing that vision, those values, and the standards of behavior, and I still talk about that today, like those are non-negotiables for me, right? Like we're going to adhere to what we say that we're going to do. We're going to try to achieve our vision every day. We're going to live by our core values, and we're going to adhere to our standards of behavior. And if we can't do that, whether that's myself, administration, coaches, student athletes, if you can't do that, then you just can't be here, right? Because our jobs are too hard, and the things that we have to deal with on a daily basis are too hard to have to worry about what we're doing and what others are doing internally. And we can't have internal battles because of the battles that we have to fight externally. And so let's just all get on that same page and understand that. And again, if you're not willing to do that, that's okay. But we got to figure that out and move forward. And so I think that for me, and that's a hard conversation, because again, I was 30, just turned 31 when I got the AD's job at Commerce. And again, I'm sitting in the room with folks that are, twice my age, some, that have been in the business a while. And here's this 31-year-old saying, hey, look, here's where we're going, and here's what we're doing. But I think the key to all of it for me was to just be consistent in my behavior. And I think I learned that really, really quickly is I have to be the same person day in and day out. And if I have a meeting with the track coach and the track coach gets upset, I can't, in the next meeting I have with the softball coach, well, I can't let my emotions go from the track coach meeting to the softball coach meeting, and the softball coach not sure who they're going to get within their meeting, because it's not the softball coach's fault that meeting got heated before them, right? And so I've got to understand, and I think I learned that pretty quickly. And that's what's really that's what drives me every day, is to be that consistent leader, that everyday dude, if you will, so to speak, so that people know what they're going to get.
Yeah. So I bet when we review this podcast in retrospect, we're going to see some common themes that you're espousing here between your answers. And this next question is one that I think is interesting. You know, ads are viewed from a lot of different perspectives, but probably the one that the fans view the ads from more than anything else is, you know, can you hire coaches that can have success?
Right.
And if you know, having just spoken to where Texas A&M Commerce football was, I know personally where Austin Peay football was when you
Right.
arrived as athletic director. You hire Will Healy. The Govs go on to win an OVC championship for the first time. As one of my former coach friends used to say, since the rocks cooled.
That's exactly
And
right.
then, you know, Colby goes on and wins a national championship there at Commerce. Um, what do you look for when you're hiring a head coach? You know, I'll just leave it at that. What do you look for when you're hiring a head coach?
Well, I think every place is different, right? And I think Commerce and Austin Peay were similar in their situation, in the fact that both were on hard times, right? Commerce was different because Commerce had success beforehand, but just over the last 15, 20 years before that, just had not had any success, right? And it was about changing culture, and it's about changing mindset, and it's about changing attitudes and changing behavior. And as I looked at both of them, as I've told people in the hiring committee and going through that process, look, we've hired the same type coach for the last 15, 20 years, right? It's time for us to do something different, because what's the worst thing that could happen? We continue to lose. Like, that's what we've been doing, right? And that was kind of the same way, at Commerce. I was looking for someone, first and foremost, I always look for someone that can build relationships, because I'm a firm believer that this business is all about relationship building. And can they build relationships with people in the community? Can they build relationships with people from a recruit standpoint, with other coaches, really within the department? How are they going to be able to build relationships? And then, do they have a vision, right? And can they create vision? Can they articulate that vision? But more importantly, do they have the emotional intelligence and wherewithal to go implement that vision? Because I think a lot of people can create vision and you can articulate it, but you don't have the wherewithal to go out and then implement that vision, right? And knowing that it's going to be hard to do that. So those are things that are important to me as well. And then understanding that, especially a football coach standpoint, at the end of the day, you're going to be the CEO of that program. And there are going to be so many things that are going to come at you. And can you manage that, right? Are you humble enough about yourself to where if you need help, that you're going to come ask for help? And that's what I've learned about really hiring first-time head coaches is you've got to understand, as a first-time head coach, that you've got to be humble enough to say, I don't know, and come ask that question, right? And I think once people do that and they understand that it's okay to do that, I think they become more successful. Then at Austin Peay, I mean, again, we hired a 30-year-old who was the passing game coordinator and passing game coordinator for a team that probably threw the ball past the line of scrimmage about 4 times a game, right? So this was just a title, because if you looked at just their style of play and those type of things, they didn't really do it. But again, it was about Will's energy, right? And who he was going to be and how he was going to breathe life into that program, and the recruiting chops that he had within the state of Tennessee, and understanding that, right? And those were the things that were important to us at the time, because again, we'd hired the same type coach there, for the last 15, 20 years, and it just didn't work. And we needed to do something different. It was really, really important for us to do that. And so I think that's, every place is different, and every hire that you're going to make is different. And you've got to understand that. And obviously here at Stephen F. Austin, I brought in Colby because there was familiarity. And I didn't feel like here at SFA, it was an instant rebuild and things that we had to do moving forward. But I needed someone who had the presence about him, someone who had the past experience of having success and moving a program from not having success to being successful and being able to build that culture moving forward. I think all those things were important, and each of those 3 hires were certainly different.
All right, two final questions as we bring this to a wrap here in a minute. You're teaching a class on campus.
Yep.
There are a few athletic directors that do that. I think that's actually a cool thing. I think it's a good thing. Tell me why you're teaching in class.
Yeah, well, so it's a sports marketing class, and I use the term teach again in air quotes, kind of like I do with being an athlete, because I don't know how much teaching I'm doing, but it's more conversation in real life, and I bring individuals and just using my network to bring individuals in there to really help expand the exposure that these students have moving forward. But ultimately, I did it because we were short on some adjuncts here from a college of business perspective, and our sports business program had really starting to grow, and they need some help. But B, most importantly for me, it gives me a chance to connect with students, right? And it gives me a chance to connect with them in a different setting and to understand where they're coming from, because I actually use them as a focus group for us as well, right? And so that we can, hey, what are we doing from a departmental standpoint that we can do better? How can we communicate better with students? What are you looking for when you come to games, right? I mean, all those things and all those conversations that we can have. But I think it's important, again, and especially at a regional comprehensive institution like SFA, where our department is not self-sufficient, and we're not financially we don't stand on our own financially, and so to be a part of that and to build that network and to build that relationship with campus, I think is really important. And I think it shows campus that, hey, our job here is to be the front porch of the institution, but there's a whole house attached to that porch, and we want to do what we can to certainly help that. And I'm going to lead those efforts as well. But I enjoy it, man. It's a lot of fun. Again, just to see, have the different interactions with students is a lot of fun, and I'm just thankful that those folks would allow me to do it. So,
all right. So this is a 3-part barbecue question. Ready?
Gotcha.
You lived in Memphis and you're in Texas now. Okay, first question is ribs, dry or wet?
Wet.
Wet. Okay, interesting.
Wet.
So
yep.
That's a little bit against the Memphis grain in some ways.
It is a little bit. Yep, a little bit.
Yeah. In Memphis, Laird Veach had a hard time with this because he has to watch what he says.
That's exactly right.
As AD at Memphis. But Rendezvous, Corky's, Central, or was there another one that stood out to you?
Central Barbecue, head and shoulders, like not even close. Like that's the spot.
Okay. All right. And so now the last one, and don't just go to where you're sitting today, Texas barbecue or Memphis barbecue, and they're different, right? So
they are. That's the thing. So that's what I learned real quick, even at being a Commerce, is like you've got to do what Texas does well. So I never get pork in Texas. I'll always do beef or brisket or something. But whenever I go to Memphis, it's all about pork barbecue and what we're doing, and the pork shoulders and those type of things. I'm a bigger fan of Memphis barbecue than I am Texas barbecue. I think I think what they have, again, having the pork, the sauces, the spices, those type of things. I think it's better. But again, you've got to do what both places do well at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. So you got a group of athletic directors around your age. They seem to have some kind of smoking competition, barbecue competition. Are you part of that group?
I am not part of that group, but I do my own. I've got my own smoker, and I do. I always tell people when I'll smoke ribs or chicken, it said you can take the boy out of Memphis, but you can't take the Memphis out of the boy. And so that's kind of what I do, and it's fun. I don't do it often, but do it, maybe, once every couple months or so. But it's fun for sure.
Yeah. Well, if you listen to this podcast with any regularity at all, you'd be disappointed if I didn't ask a food question every third or fourth
exactly
episode.
Right. I know. I mean, between Jared and Georgia Southern.
Man, it's been great. As I expected, it would go fast. It has. Ryan, thanks for joining me and spending a little bit of time today.
Always a pleasure, Mike. Appreciate you and everything that you guys do for us.
For sure. So you've been listening to From the Chair. I'm your host, Mike Hamilton. Today's guest has been Ryan Ivey, the Director of Athletics at Stephen F. Austin University. We appreciate Ryan and his partnership with Learfield. Listen to this podcast each Wednesday or on wherever you listen to your audio podcasts across a multitude of different platforms. We hope you'll consider the Varsity Network as one of those. And also view the podcast on YouTube when you get a chance, if you just want to see our interesting faces. Right, Ryan? So thanks for joining,
radio,
and we'll see you next time.